Welcome to the Rockin Rich Lynch on the Radio Show. I'm your host, Rockin Rich Lynch, inviting you to join me as we discover great new music by bands and artists from around the world. With interviews, music news and reviews, great prizes, and a whole lot more. Visit us online today at soundpress.net for great music promotion and publicity. Hi, this is Rockin Rich Lynch, and you're listening to the very best of Rockin Rich Lynch on the radio. We recently moved our operations from the New York, New Jersey market to Nashville, Tennessee, and we are now looking for a production and broadcast partner in the region to take the radio show to new heights. If you're a band, musician, solo act, or represent a musical project in any genre, please visit soundpress.net and our new site, musiccitynashville.net, to learn how we can help get your message to the world. Now, please enjoy this great interview from our archives. Ladies and gentlemen, the artist we're talking with today has consistently embodied the rugged and durable sound of Heartland rock, so much so that his 1980 EMI debut was titled Heartland. In 2012, he's back with his 25th studio album entitled The Hang, and it's a pleasure for me to have a few minutes to hang with the great Michael Stanley today. Michael, welcome to the program.
Nice to be with you. How you doing?
I'm real good. And, you know, Michael, I was a fan. I remember you on the radio back in the New York City area, so much back in the 80s. And I got a lot I want to talk to you with today, okay?
Sure, you got it.
First off, you might be interested in, we ran into a former bandmate of yours 2 weeks ago at B.B. King's in New York City.
Who would that be?
Daniel Pecchio.
Oh, there you go. One of the original members.
Right, and Daniel was there as part of an unannounced gig by the great Cleveland area-based band Glass Harp.
Oh, that's a great group, and it's great to see them that they're still out there playing.
Oh yeah, now was the Harp a big thing in the Cleveland area?
Well, they were based out of the Youngstown, Warren area, which is like an hour south east of here. But after conquering that area, they moved into Cleveland, and they were a real big band up here.
Okay, well, the other thing I wanted to discuss before we get into the Hang and everything else that you had going on is a couple of months ago I had Greg Kihn, another 80s rocker who had a couple of hits on the radio and MTV,
right, on
the show. And Greg Kihn, you guys there seems to be a small fraternity of ex-rockers who have gone on to, have radio careers, in part probably because of the name recognition, but to service their hometown. Now, Greg is a morning guy, a top-rated morning guy in San Francisco, and you yourself are a drive time guy out there in Ohio. Now, have you guys ever met at any of the Talkers conventions or anything like that?
I've not met Greg since we entered the disc jockey business. We played some gigs over the years together, and I always thought his band was really cool. He's a great guy, and it was just sort of a natural transition. One of the nice things is you're still dealing with music that you love, and the other nice thing is that it's not an 8-hour a day job, so it leaves you time to do other musical things that you're still interested in.
Oh yeah, and you and I are kindred spirits a lot in that way too, because I know that you began your radio career back in college. I had a college radio show, and now I'm doing this show on the internet and iTunes, and so it's not to the same level, but I've gotten to talk to so many of my personal heroes like yourself just doing this. It's amazing. It's amazing the type of people I've been able to talk to. And as we move on in the show later on, Michael, I'd like to ask you a little bit about some of the interviews you've done on your show. But let's get into the career of Michael Stanley and the Michael Stanley Band, okay?
Sure.
The website, everybody, is michaelstanley.com. We're talking to the great Michael Stanley. And my sister had Heartland, Michael. I remember that was a big album back in 1980. I was about 15 years old. She was a big Springsteen fan. I guess she liked the sound of He Can't Love You. Of course, had Clarence Clemens on that track, which the big sax solo from that song. And you guys that was the 47th song played on MTV.
Yeah, we kind of hit it right at the right place at that point. EMI, the company we were with, was committed to what was then new idea of doing videos. MTV had just started, and it all kind of came together, this confluence of things. And so, it was great because all of a sudden they needed stuff to play. So anything that they had, they played it a lot, and that certainly helped that tune and helped us.
Right. As I said, I was a 15-year-old Michael, and as I say to a lot of the people that I have on the show, I had a bit of a problem. I was almost like an MTV addict. Like from the day it came out, it was like August of 1981. I was going into my sophomore year in high school, and regrettably, I spent about the next decade pretty much parked in front of a TV. But I didn't know I was doing research.
It's true. It was, you thought you were just having a good time. Maybe you could write it off as a, tax thing at some point. But I mean, it was so unique at the time. And pre-internet and everything else, it was one of the first ways where maybe a lot of people could actually see the bands that they'd been listening to.
And it wasn't just He Can't Love You. You guys came back in 1983 with My Town. I remember being a fan of the Michael Stanley Band, and back, late in the 80s or maybe early 90s, I do remember thinking to myself, God, I wonder whatever happened to Michael Stanley, because it almost like you guys were on the verge of superstardom. Do you know what I'm talking about? I mean, it seems like you didn't, I don't know if you peaked or what, but you had the two big songs, you had the MTV exposure, but have you ever thought about, why you weren't able to kick that up to the next level?
Well, it all came down basically to a very bad call by yours truly. And it was when My Town was out as a single from the album You Can't Fight Fashion, and the album was doing really well, and the single was in the top 40, and our contract was running out. And EMI wanted a 6-month extension as opposed to just re-signing up for another X number of years. And for the first time in a long career, I thought that we might be in the driver's seat. And I said, no, I'm not going to give you a 6-month extension. You either sign us for 3 years or 5 years or whatever, or that's it. And they called my bluff and pulled all the support from the album and the song, and that was kind of the beginning of the end.
So there was a reason for that. And back in that time, the record companies certainly did have a lot more power than they do now.
Oh yeah, it was their ball game, and but that was the way it was, and I actually think it was in a lot of ways it was better. In some ways it was worse, but it was what it was, and I think in terms of being a touring band, that was the greatest time to do it back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Right. I think we should move right into that, but I do want to back up, say we're talking to Michael Stanley. MichaelStanley.com is the website. Michael Stanley Band in the 70s and 80s. Michael Stanley and the Resonators is the band that he's put together in the last decade or so that I know you tour with. You did mention some of the stuff about touring in the 70s in your latest press release. You did mention a lot of the bands that you toured with.
We toured with just about everybody. It was incredible. You're talking about, in your job you've been able to run into people who you're and talk with people who you're a fan of. And it was the same for us. I mean, we were musicians, we were in a band, but we were all, we all started out as fans, and we were still fans, So when we had a chance to get play a show or get on a tour with somebody that we really liked and respected, that just made it all the much better. So
as far as Springsteen, was that an opening slot that you were able to work with?
Yeah, it's funny because in the I think if you said around 1980 or a little bit after that, especially in the Cleveland area, there weren't any two bigger draws than Bruce and us, and that was about the pinnacle of it. But this was a show at Kent State University, and there was a local band opened up. We were second. Bruce was headliner, and it was right at the start of the tour for the Wild and the Innocent album, and we hadn't really broken yet. Tickets were like $2, and we hadn't broken yet either. And I think maybe 400 people showed up in a 10,000 seat thing,
And Bruce was amazing. I have some of those bootlegs from those Cleveland shows back in the 70s.
Oh, he's the best. I mean, he's the gold standard as far as live shows go. Nobody did it better or does it better, and it's just, to me, it's what it's supposed to be. It's what a rock and roll show is supposed to be.
And for a good part of his career, he didn't have opening acts, so that was somewhat of a rarity.
Yeah, I think soon after that, especially after Born to Run hit, that was it for opening acts. And so we're one of the few, I think, that got a chance to open for him along the way.
Now, some of the acts that you also have listed is the Eagles. I know you share a producer in Bill Simzik.
We did a lot of dates on the One of These Nights tour. We did some things on the Hell Freezes Over tour, and just about every tour that they did, we were on there somewhere, right from the start. And always good guys to work with. And if you're going to be on a date with them, you better know how to sing.
Yeah, that's true, right? I wouldn't want to open my mouth if I had to perform with the Eagles. Now, Michael, I don't want to. I want to keep going on a little bit about the Michael Stanley Band. You guys, because again, like you plied your trade, you were out there working it from the '70s, and it took until 1980 for you guys to hit nationally. Now, I know, like with the first big hit song that you had, "He Can't Love You," you weren't singing on that.
Right. Well, there'd always been, except for maybe one or two albums, there had always been two lead singers in the band. When I started the band, one of the guys I first hired was a gentleman by the name of Jonah Coslin, and another guitar player, singer-songwriter. And I always liked bands where there were a couple singers, and a couple different songwriters. So to me, it was just a thing of, what are the best songs we have available, and who sings them best? And if it was me, great. If it was somebody else, that was fine too. The whole idea was to make a name for ourselves, and whose tune or whose vocal was the one that actually did it. And it really didn't matter to me that much. I mean, people have made it a big deal, like, oh, it must have been some serious rift, when this happened. But no, it was a thing. We were really lucky. When He Can't Love You broke, that really gave us about another 7 or 8 years, to work and to make, like 5 more albums.
Now, since the Michael Stanley Band has disbanded and you've put out solo records and records with the Resonators, has that approach stayed the same, or have you been mainly the singular identity?
No, they're basically solo albums now. In terms of, as far as writing goes, I'll write with anybody, and Bob Palander and I, a long-time MSB member, we still write together all the time, and anybody in the band, if they have an idea, a tune, and it works, we do it.
Now, I got to tell you, I spent several hours with The Hang over the last couple of days because it arrived yesterday, and I'm liking it a lot. Now, before I get there, I just want to ask you, there's a saying of yours that appears on your website, and it also appears on the inner section of the CD. It's your world, pay attention. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's basically exactly what it says. It's the thing. I really have the feeling that there's too many people feel, that they're somewhat helpless in what's going on around them in the world, whether it be on a real personal level or a more global level. But, it all starts with everything. All sorts of change starts with one person, one idea, one move. And, it's kind of that thing of, I've always said, like, if you don't vote, well, then you don't really have any right to bitch about who gets elected. So if you don't act on anything that you think is wrong, or try to fix something, or initiate something new that's right, then, you don't really, you're not in the game. We're all on this ride together on this crazy circle that's flying around the sun, and he who hesitates is lunch.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Michael, because one thing I've done with this radio show, every time an election season comes up, I try to speak to alternative voices, to see what we can do to affect some sort of change. And there's an organization called AmericansElect.org right now, and they're actually working on getting a third-party candidate on every state ballot for the fall election. And it's a really interesting approach because it eliminates parties.
Yeah, well, it's become such a broken system, and obviously there have been certain things that have gone on recently with the Occupy Wall Street movement and various other things, and back to the Rock the Vote and all the others. It's a system that you need to be involved in, and if you, like I said, if you want to sit around and bitch about it, but you don't want to do anything about it, well then, that's kind of counterproductive. So it's sort of a put your money where your mouth is situation, and realize that you can affect change. It may not be all the change you want, whichever way you're looking to change it. I'm not, I always tell people, if you want me to tell you who to vote for, I will. But at the same time, my main thing is just go out and exercise your right to vote for whoever you want.
Yeah,
that's the process.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think the the great musicians of the world need to first come to some sort of consensus, and then you can all work together to, move in that direction. There's certainly a lot of problems, and things aren't getting better either. It just seems to be getting worse and worse. Michael Stanley is on the phone with us right now. MichaelStanley.com. March 2012 sees the new release of The Hang, Michael's 25th studio album. And as I told you, Michael, I've been spending a lot of time with it. From Somewhere Else is the opening track. I have written down that that's a feel-good anthem for the melting pot.
Exactly. Well, it's that whole thing of realizing that the whole look, the whole makeup of the country, our country, is it's not what it was when I was 16 years old. There's a new reality here. There's a new mixture. There's a new everything, and it's all valid. And you have to realize that just because someone's coming from a different spot. Once again, we're all in this ride together, and you can pull against the tide or pull with it.
Now, we won't do them all, Michael, but track 2 is The Last Great Illusion. I have written here, tasty acoustic lead section, and not exactly sure what this is about. It seems to be more personal.
Well, I would say a lot of them are pretty personal. It's basically just looking back to that as much as you can at this point, looking back to when you were, in your formative years, probably being the teenage years, of, what you thought was important. And from the standpoint of that, on that song, it's more the fact of, I've always believed there was something right around the corner. And I will continue to believe that. Hopefully it is something good. It doesn't necessarily always end up that way, but the idea that you never know what's going to happen. I realize that's a real recurring thread in my songwriting. But you have to, once again, remain open to it. And then whether it's a positive or a negative thing, you have to deal with it in the appropriate manner.
Michael, I have read that you've been true to your whole Heartland message over the course of your career, and that you regularly write songs about patriotism, culture, and our way of life in America. So you've been true to yourself in that regard, and this album does not stray from that message.
Well, it's something. I didn't get into this to be a politician. But as a songwriter, I think you owe it to yourself and to your audience to comment on anything, whether it be romantic involvements or political involvements or whatever. And once again, it's not a thing where I'm asking anyone to necessarily throw in with my idea, but or at least be open to whatever it is that is being presented to them, and go, well, yeah. Or you can just take it as a song. I like the song. I don't really care what he's talking about.
Now, track 3 is How Many Guitars Do You Need? It seems to be a song about greed in a lot of ways, probably over rampant materialism, where, really how many cars or how many guitars do you need? And it seems to be implied that, maybe people who have so much could maybe do something better with their money than buy another guitar just for the sake of that.
Well, I think it's what we saw, and I think it's speaking to what we saw in the banking dilemma and the financial meltdown we had a few years ago, in that it's, there's so much incredible wealth involved, and I think it got to the point where it became like a video game for the people involved. It's just how high can we get this score up here, and not exactly, and certainly not what can we do with this money to make things better. I mean, and speaking to the point of, after you have a certain amount of money, really, how much more do you really need? I mean, it's it's nice to have money as opposed to not have money. But you can only drive one car at a time. You can only play one guitar at a time. You can only live in one house at a time. And it's just speaking to that thing where I think it's it's just become a little too focused on not a little. Very much too focused on just the bottom line in particular.
All right. Now, the press release for The Hang says, it quotes you saying this might be the darkest album that you've ever put out.
Yes, I think it is. I think without a doubt. But at the same time, I think it's a real hopeful one, too. The fact that whatever the darkness you're dealing with is, there is something on the other side. And once again, remaining open to that and being able to get through it. And that's the concept of The Hang. It's about who you hang with, not so much what you do, but who you do it with, whether it's make music, whether it's who you marry, whether it's who you're dating, whether it's your friends. When push comes to shove, these are the people that are going to get you through these bad times.
Now, I think clues to the dark period that you might have been alluding to might be found in songs like Fait Accompli and Martha.
Yeah, Martha's a song written for my mother. She passed away about 18 months ago, and followed quickly a couple months later by my father, and then about 6 months after that, my wife. So it was a sort of a bleak period.
A tragic trifecta.
Yeah, it was. The negative hits just kept on coming, and so on one level, I'm sorry that all that gets reflected in the songwriting, but at the same time, that's what songwriters do. But then it was a question of, how do you also express coming out of this? Because everybody's going to go through those things. Everybody's going to go through them. I hope they don't, but they will. And for me, it was just knowing and finding out how many actual wonderful people were in my life to help me get through all that.
Yeah, Michael, because that in a way sounds like piling on. I mean, I'm sorry for what you went through. That sounds like I thought I had a tough year and a half.
Well, you don't, you never know what's coming. Like I say, you got to be open to it. You hope it's something good, but it could just as easily be something bad, and it just all comes back to that. I wouldn't have gotten through it without the people in my band, without my friends, without the music.
So I would say that those are my main favorite songs off the hang. I also like Breaking Down, which again seems to be personal, but could also be a theme song for the times that we've been discussing.
Exactly, and that was I wrote that one with Michael Simzik, who is one of Bill Simzik's sons, and I think Michael is 22 years old. So here you had a 63-year-old guy and a 22-year-old guy writing a song together, and it was a real cool thing. He brought a lot of energy to the project, and it's one of my favorite things on the record.
And also back in the day, which is a phrase that when I'm talking to you guys on the radio, I tend to use way too much.
Well, the older you get, the more days there are in the back. So that was just one of those that of sort of standing back and applauding the naivete that we all went into this business with, and we went into it for reasons that it was a rush. It was fun. We were doing something that was new and interesting and cool, and hopefully a positive thing. And the fact that we're still here doing it.
And thrown in for good measure, a cover of Dire Straits from the Making Movies album, Romeo and Juliet, inspired me so much to print off those chords today and start playing that one myself, because I always loved the Dire Straits version, and I know the Indigo Girls had also done a cover of that.
It's just a great song that I loved from the first time I heard it, and it was one of my late wife's favorite songs, and I actually put it on the album without her knowing it, thinking it would be a surprise when it came out. And unfortunately, she didn't. She wasn't here when the album finally came out, but it was always, it's just a great song, and you just hope you do it justice.
And you did, Michael. It sounded very good, and geez, I'm actually a little sad, but I am. The album is so strong, and like I said to you before, I mean, I was a fan from. We had the Heartland album in our house. The two songs that were your big hits I knew, but I didn't know much more before or up until now. But I'm really liking The Hang, and I'm going to go back and start going through a lot of the other albums because, there's some tasty, classy songwriting on this record.
Well, thank you. And, the reason I got into this way back when, originally was to write songs. I wasn't necessarily interested in being the guy in front who sang or anything else. The songwriting process was what drew me to the whole thing, and it's still what keeps me in it. I mean, I love playing and everything else, but I've kind of used it as a joke over the years, but it's also true. It's songwriting is just far, far cheaper than therapy. And you can work out a lot of things for yourself that way.
No doubt. So you took the idea of Heartland rock to its to extreme, Michael. You had a severe heart attack in 1991, which led to a concept album about that event in 1996 called Coming Up for Air.
Yeah, it was. I kind of got tired of explaining what it was all like to people, to have a heart attack so early on in life. So I decided just to, put it down musically. And once again, it was a way to work through it for me. But it's, it's an event in the past, and it got your attention, and it's one of those things where something definitely positive came out of it, because you realize, okay, time is limited here. You don't really know, and you better concentrate on the important things and put the trivial things aside.
Give you an opportunity to take some stock and also possibly look after yourself?
Sure, yeah, hopefully. But we're 20 years down the line from that, so all systems go at the moment.
Cool. So the health is good. Did you have to make some major life changes?
Yeah, well, it all came about from, 20 years of bad road food and, stress and smoking and everything else, and it just all sort of came together in the perfect negative storm, and there you were.
Right. Okay, the great Michael Stanley is on the phone with us right now. His new album out now in March 2012 is called The Hang. MichaelStanley.com is the website. And Michael, since we are both radio hosts and interviewers, I'd like to just ask you a little bit more about that. We touched upon it at the start of the show, but can you tell me who have been some of your favorite artists that you've been able to interview over the years?
Oh, my favorite would have been McCartney, and my least favorite probably would have, although it was pretty funny, I've interviewed Ozzy 3 times.
Oh.
And I have yet to understand one word that Ozzy has said in any of the 3 interviews. So you just kind of ask a question, you get the answer, and then you just go on because you don't have any idea what he said.
Yeah. He's hard to understand sometimes.
He is. I might have caught him on a bad day, but there's been a lot of great guys. John Entwistle was fun to deal with. Peter Frampton, great guy. Clapton, Keith Richards, George Martin. I've been real lucky. I've been lucky to have a chance to talk to people whose work and I've always been a fan of. So that just makes it all that more special.
So you get many of them as they're rolling through town?
Some of them is rolling through town. Some of them you pick up, when you're out and about. Put them on tape and use them, and it's the whole thing of just trying to find something that will be interesting to our audience. And obviously, it's a classic rock format, so pretty much anybody that played a guitar in the last 30 years is fair game.
So you're still going strong today with Michael Stanley and the Resonators, which itself is a mighty big band. I counted 9 pieces.
It's a big band. I can't get away from big bands. MSB was, I think, a 7-piece band, and this one's a little bigger. And we play as much as we can. Everybody at this point has, sort of a regular job, so it's as far away as we can get on the weekends and back. And playing is, it's still fun. It's just it's a fun thing to do. And I'm playing with people that I really love, and 4 of us were, from MSB, and so that thread continues. And it's just, I figure we're all looking at the Stones. As long as the Stones can play, then we figure we still valid,
Exactly. Well, Michael Stanley, thank you so much for talking to me today on the Rockin' Rich Lynch on the radio show, and good luck with the Hang album. We really like it here.
Rich, I appreciate the time. Best to all your listeners and everybody. Continue to rock until otherwise notified.
Thanks for listening to the Rockin' Rich Lynch on the radio show, part of the SoundPress.net radio network. Remember, if you're a band or artist looking for promotion, or if you'd like to sponsor this show or add this program to your station, please get in touch with us today at SoundPress.net.